Hello. You are a chatty bunch. Still chatting. So much to chat about. It's okay. I'll wait. Just kidding. Chatty bunch. I love that. Great thing. Great quality. I'm really glad you guys are all connecting. Welcome to our second night of faculty talks on our 6th week of summer workshops this summer. How was day 2? Thumbs up? Good, good, good. Can we have a big round of applause for all your incredible instructors? Can we do it? No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do a wave. No waves tonight. I don't want to dad joke that to death because I've been accused of that. Okay. And can we have a round of applause for the cushions? Because they're all gone back there, so they're clearly popular. Woo! These people outside, they were going to come in, but they saw the cushion thing is empty, so they just turned around and walked the other way. So, yeah, fuck that. Anyway, I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are he, him. Welcome to the second night of workshop of faculty talks. We have a wonderful lineup for you tonight. We are going to hear from artist Nabil Gonzalez. We're going to hear from writer Garrard Conley. And we are going to hear from poet Patricia Spears Jones. Let's hear, give it up. You're not going to do a wave, are you? There you go. So she just did a wave. That's good. Really, honestly, I probably won't stop. Let's just be honest. Okay, so let's remember that Garrett and Patricia will be signing. Patricia. I said it like I'm in Italy or something like that. Patricia. Si chiama Patrizia, dai. We'll be signing their books at the back of the room after the event, and the books will be for sale. There are other books back there by faculty who are here this week. And in the bookstore, I know I'm going to say this again tomorrow, so get used to it. Then there's a bookstore between the two halves of the gallery next door that have lots of books by former Falk Fellows, by faculty members, and other people with long-standing relationships with the Fine Arts Work Center. I encourage you to check it out. At the same time as you check out the summer exhibition that's up next door, it's really wonderful. It's called The Edge Condition, curated by former Falk Fellow Matt Bollinger, and consists of work by about 20 or so former Falk Fellows. It's a wonderful show, and all proceeds from sale of the work goes to support our programming. The gallery will be open after the event, and it's open every day from Tuesday to Saturday from 12 to 5. As always, a big shout out to East End Books for helping us manage our bookstore. And let's see here. Ooh, double-sided. That's cool. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation for generously supporting our summer public programming. Restrooms are still down the hall. Don't have to talk about the cushions. Again, we have assisted listening devices if that would make your experience better tonight. So please check with Hannah or Sarah, and they can hook you up with that if you need it. And finally, please turn your cell phones to silent or off. And let's get started. We're going to have Patricia's going to go first, but don't get up yet. We're going to have one of your students come up to introduce you. I'm very pleased to welcome Lynn Vitti to the stage to introduce Patricia.
Short. Can you hear me? Good. My pronouns are she, her, hers. It is my honor and my delight to introduce Renaissance woman and force of nature, Patricia Spears Jones. Born and raised in Arkansas, transplanted herself to New York City, where she has lived for a little over 4 decades. Poet, playwright, political activist, anthologist, and teacher. She has at least 9 books, probably more. I'm reading from the official bio. The most recent of which is The Beloved Community. Lots of copies on the table. 2023. A Lucent Fire, New and Selected Poems. She co-edited the seminal anthology published in 1978, Ordinary Women, an anthology of New York City women. And Think, Poems for Aretha Franklin's Inauguration Day Hat, 2009. Her poems have appeared in anthologies and journals, including The New Yorker, Brooklyn Rail, Persimmon Tree, Cutthroat Journal, and Plume. Her essays and interviews have been published in many collections, including Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry, and The Whiskey of Our Discontent, Gwendolyn Brooks as Conscience and Change Agent. She is Poet Laureate of New York State. She received the 2017 Jackson Prize, the National Endowment for Arts and New York Foundation for Arts grants from the Foundation for Contemporary Arts, and an award from that organization. She is the organizer of American Poets Conference and a fellow emerita of the Black Earth Institute. Please welcome Patricia Spears Jones.
All right, this should be fun. Huh? What? Oh, well, I'll just be there. Hello, wow, a full house. Hello, everybody. It rained, the sun came out, the ants are everywhere. Welcome to Fine Arts Work Center. All right, I was gonna do a talk, and then I realized that a lot of you don't know my writing, so I better just read some poems. But I really want to say beforehand that often people are talking about political poems. Things are crazy right now. But let's think about this. Political poems are not just about governance and electoral politics. They're also about sexual politics, cultural politics, economic status, how people, because all of those things embody issues around power. And so I have always, as I said to many people, written a lot of poems. They're not particularly political, but they have lots of politics in them. So, and occasionally they actually are really political. So I'm going to read some poems from, obviously from the beloved community, but actually I'm going to start with one from A Lucent Fire, given the current political thing, because it really is from Think, Poems for Aretha Franklin's Inauguration Day hat, which was a cultural milestone, because that was the first time a black church lady's hat became a huge symbol of change. And a whole lot of people didn't get it, but the people who did understood exactly what was going on. The other thing about it is that it was designed by a guy from a Korean American named Luke Song. So here's a poem, Wearing Mr. Song. So what if her voice is just a half beat ahead of the taped strings swelling somewhat over them all? All these people, all this color, a dash of cold to keep everyone awake. And sing she did, wearing a gray chapeau for Mr. Song. How righteous is that? The trim just so. How righteous is Aretha, early morning, so damn happy. A president who looks like a skinny version of her brother. A second cousin, an old boyfriend, the helpful guy at the bank. How can you thank the Lord better than that preacher from California who seemed to think he was at some crystal palace, the walls cracked and crumbling under the weight of his bigotry? Truth be told, she will have none of that. Oh no. She sings Sweet Land of Liberty. Voice crackles in places where once it climbed fearless of octaves. It is still her voice. She's still Aretha. This is America. And things do change. And change can come when it needs to. Well, that was the hopeful part. Forget that. We're now going into the land of misery and pain. Sorry. I really do have a horrible cackle, don't I? Yes, I do. I'm sorry, I do. All right. In 2020, I was the Hollins, I was the Lewis H. Rubin something chair for Hollins College. I got on a train from New York to Roanoke with my best clothes, my makeup, everything. It was, and within 2 months, hell broke loose. First and last nights in Virginia, January and May 2020. First night in Virginia, we stop at a CVS late. The store is vast and sorry. The lone clerk slow wipes a counter. She slumps, sags, all that worry in her spills onto the counter's hard plastic top. I gather items and wait for her suddenly cheerful acknowledgement. It seems as if fate has made this place a symbol of American want. Everything in this place seems cheap except the products for sale. The lighting, the railings, the counter. This is replicated in Walmart, Walgreens. Only the dollar store does not pretend to be anything other than a repository of things you need and things you don't. The clerks are not well paid, and at night left to fend for themselves in this plastic vastness. On my last visit, the clerk stands behind a cheap plastic protector, more symbol than reality. She wears her mask and behind it smiles. She has a job, and that's good, but this is yet another display, and she's expendable. We all are. Like I said, things got a little bad. No, that's okay. Hold. As Audre Lorde said, hold your applause. She did. Scared the hell out of people. Okay, and they stopped applauding until she finished, and then they went. That was Saturnine. Given that this is August and Saturn is in play. We cannot feel microbes in the palms of our hands or hear nanoseconds. We can see the laser slice wind, but how it shaves beards remains mysterious. This talk of science and biologicals and viral crowns makes old men crawl into bowls of cotton waiting to be plucked at some point by cadaver slaves humming tin pan alley tunes. What's a pandemic? But one more mortality wake-up call? Tongue dulled by wine salted and cabbage stews happily forgotten, buffed shoes shining, not worn, no more perfect Windsor knot because the definition for knot has swerved from necks to bandages. If ever we could color the subatomic particles and smash them up, would they look like a Ken Tisa quarantine drawing? How that could brighten the feet step by step in August air. The summer feels like a heavy cough that starts in the chest, lingers until it exhausts patience and runs up through the throat, out into the embracing air, carrying all manner of microbes, some of which, or what could possibly infect a city, or laugh pyrotechnic, 4 a.m., alone with feral snarls and cheap guns shooting, poor man falls, mercy walks down a different block. Okay. All right, I'm changing the tempo. I don't want y'all to be so sad that you can't stand it. So I started this. So I am a huge fan of like the South American sort of new wave of everything. And one of my favorite artists was the Brazilian conceptual artist Elio Watasica. And anybody here who actually knows Portuguese, please tell me. I hope I came close to his actual name. But so I never met the guy. But I fantasized about him, and I thought it would be great. And then I thought, I could just make up a story about him and me and a lot of other people. So everything about this poem is made up, including the epigram, which is this. All my real life love interests are dead. They're artists and Latino and dead. Okay. All right, so that's you know. So, and then the title of this poem is Oh, That Brazilian Guy. Because, you know, why not? Okay. Did I ever see Elio walking some part of East Village, curly-headed and densely packed with art and drugs and death's constant shadow? Was he on the corner of Avenue B and 10th Street drinking beer and ogling the pretty Puerto Rican girls? Was he ogling me? Or was he living in an abandoned warehouse, holding on to his pencil, pen, brush on paper, cardboard, found trash, or garment district fabric offloaded by a gang out of the projects, whisking splatter of heroin, lost income, dropped dangling from a cup of bitch's brew? Oh, how to speculate this mad Hendrix-loving artist movement in El Barrio, Loisider, or was he uptown, Spanish Harlem, or on the west side, Greenwich Village, hanging with the drag queens, early a.m., everybody tired from the bars, the piers, the crumbling edifices, circa late 60s, early 70s, Nueva York, Nueva York? He was on a wild ride, the weed, his stash, the dazzled dreams of men who had survived torture, military repression, a bad economy, yet learned to take acid trips one day at a time. Oh, the love affairs we have with the myth. Oh, the what-ifs and that drug paraphernalia. Oh, night seeker, ill name, moon winds your direction home. Thus is created this mixed up third world, loud music, your lips dry from screaming in January wind, something mighty Hendrix, sun lack on a back meant for napping midday, heat exhausted. Thus, the making of a hammock, a thing of beauty, backlit by the gallerist, while duct tapes coil the rafters of some street legal post, fly fishing flies, pretended bait, tight pants dropped here and there, as thriving masquerade of the handsome Brazilian who could have been the best bad news boyfriend ever. All right. I had a lot of fun writing that. I really did. It was like, it was just, you know. And if you get a chance to see his work ever, do. It's amazing. Poet. So I was talking to Janine Wong earlier today, and I was talking about how I really, for some reason, I have this connection to Mongolia. I don't know why. Anyway, but one of my favorite poets is the poet Sui Muren, Hsimuren, and she's a little book called Across the Darkness of the River. And basically, they're all poems about, you know, her mad affair with some crazy guy who was like just a total jerk, but anyway, she still was in love with him. And I'm like, I understand. Anyway, so the epigraph is from her, please do not believe my beauty, do not trust my love. Sri Muren, an artiste from Across the Darkness of the River. The poet is Mongol. A translator follows her heart, once broken, and yet she sings in a way that makes her broken heart my broken heart. She is in exile. The mountains are now ruled by China, and her culture is assaulted daily. Buildings blasted, children made to learn Mandarin. This is all too familiar, the ways of empire, very old ones, very new ones. But these are poems of love and poems of loss. The lover's inconstancy is all too familiar. Her laments are tender than angry. There are many storms in her poems. They rise from the mountains, from the sea, from the river inside her veins, they rise up. In oceans far from her, a woman reads her words and quickly says, Sister, I have been there. His hands holding mine, gone. His lips no longer touch mine. And yet, the yellow roses, the birthday kisses, our shared embrace of deep down Chicago blues, those conversations knee-deep in the dream of dark loving tremble my heart. And so you stand in the shadows at a train station, looking for the moment your love steps off his train. He is not alone, and you will not be happy. The storms throb the streets of Taipei and scatter rose petals across the sidewalks and streets of Brooklyn. All right, and then, I've been looking at Betty Saar's work for a gazillion years, like literally, since like the early 1970s, and there's this amazing piece by her called The Mystic Chart for an Unemployed Sorceress, and I wrote a poem for it. And one of the fun things about this poem is I got to use the word runes, R-U-N-E-S, which you have to be really careful to use. It's like a really important word, and you just can't be throwing out runes. So here you go. Betty Saar's Mystic Chart for an Unemployed Sorceress. My runes are in ruins. Little laughter here for my sarcasm. What to do? This chart confuses, conflates moon, which phase, and honey, local or for some exotic shore, and what of money, my savings stuffed beneath deflating mattress. Each cold day warns me that my resume is unworthy. Who will hire me? Now that my spells are so easily broken, my warnings useless. It is a wonder that I worked as long as I did. Incantations memorized and recipes for spells written in an ink too pale for visibility. Each item sourced, the medicine worked, and then it did not. Was it the well of stories drying up, the fish scales stinking, the kitchen table, the cat wandering away while spiders spread their cosmic maps, unreadable to all but the other spiders? They cheer me again, I read the signs. Oh, how the signs obscure true knowledge, and I am blazed in this dark room, hungry, cold, and searching. Who is this thief, and why has she cast this curse? What must I do to bring runes from my parched throat, medicine back to my pockets? And then another very serious poem I wrote while I was in France, which is because that was probably the only place I could write it. In 2018, a young woman named Nia Ashley was murdered at the, murdered in Oakland at that station where it seems like black people just get murdered at the stupid ass station. Excuse me. Fruitvale Station. And this is a poem called Nia. Nia means purpose in Swahili. Nia. It sounds better in Spanish, precario, prettier, as if it isn't what it is, and there's that O. My, how will the rent get paid, the deadline met, and who ghosted me first, Valley Lover or that other one? Delicacy of skin, quick steps, quick stops, and the direction is what? There's nowhere, and the last shift is the one where tongues load a stack of sighs, bridge tall and mythic. This day and the next, volcanic shards roll toward the door, even if mountains are in the distance, thousands of miles. How the heart steadily beats as the sirens careen and angry men launch their best lives ever by taking so many others. It is a miracle, this heart steadily beating, even as the next question threatens a late spring storm, ground broken by lightning, the raindrops' rhythmic pattern honors percussionists, those that beat their instrument with a purpose, Nia, knowing how one offbeat collapses the genesis, augurs harsher storms, where the purpose becomes precarious, where death enters white-armed, white-throated, where the body drops like lightning on rain-moist ground. Right, just a few more. So now that I've gone through all of those pieces of paper, I've been writing about the devil's wife. She's not happy for good reason, because she's married to the devil. Anyway, and so I don't know how many of you know the work of Greg Tate, the great late African-American critic, literary critic, visual arts critic, musician, bon vivant, and crazy person. But he and I shared a love of James Brown, and so this is dedicated to him. The Devil's Wife explains broken 45s. And I know there are people in this room who actually have 45 RPMs. Let's hear it for them. Okay. All right, quote. There was a time, James Brown sang, and I want to dance, but that causes the devil to prance upon me, then lash higher his liege around my waist and squeeze me till my voice box almost shatters. You're a doll, he says, as he smashes our turntable, laughing at the clatter ancient 45 RPMs make as they break. Treasures from a lost last century, when sweet soul music elevated our scissoring feet. How he hated haloed afros, radiant with pride, and that slide away from suffering. The devil hates black genius. Made him work harder than hard to render it witless and dope-stung. He hates having to move one iota out of his trifling comfort zone. Can't I listen to one piece of my heart untarnished by his guile? Child, soul music is now in limbo, and me bruised again, cleaning up those broken 45s. But somewhere on the other side of this sad kingdom, another woman augurs the audio, and James Brown sings out, there was a time. And then two more. So here's my really, really, totally political poem. So when I was in Olympic Valley earlier this summer, when I was teaching at the Community of Writers, as a faculty person, you have to write a poem every day, so I had to write a poem. And I wrote one that is slightly different from this revised version, but a lot of it is still there. Discontented summer. Lies and jests move rapidly, glossy men and women repeat. All you can eat banquets, presidents toast. Outside, the blanched bones of dead children settle. One huge wing dips beneath clouds while the other crumples. Every picture tells a story, but which story and who makes the picture? Like the white-winged dove on the radio, like a black-winged raven, and how spectacular the moon rise. Tired of cacophony, tired of lies, tired of jest, tired are the people who drank chlorine added to the list of COVID deaths? Are the people who bought the bleach on the list of COVID spreaders? Dice roll and drum feast, guns shovel next to buckets of nails. Guns shuffle, all on deck with the liars and jesters. Children's bones rattle. Who is feeling the shock of these lies and jest? Who is laughing? Who, to quote Amiri Baraka, who? And then my last poem is dedicated to the late and wonderful Clarabelle Alegria, and also to all poets, and you'll see why. All right, and I'm gonna move all my mess off of here so that the next people up will not have this mess. Sorry. It'll be clean for you, my dear. All right. So Clarabel Alegria was, she was like a thorn in the side of both the Nicaraguans and the Salvadorans. Yes. All right. And she lived a long life, thank God. And the other thing I'll say about this was that I wrote this at the Robert Rauschenberg residency in Captiva, Florida, so I could literally see the stars. On the death of Clarabel Alegria, 1924-2018. On earth, she marked her days with rage and love, and fought the generals and their armies of thieves and torturers. Her pen was mighty, so also their arms. Death is the shadow twin, the one remaining in the foothills by the back door in a convent off a mountainside. And yet, a mother's breast awaits her infant's mouth. A rooster crows and children gather what food there is while bells ring across the foothills when the soldiers leave. A music of hope even as another child is buried and a landmine erupts a few kilometers from hospital. We live in a time of suffering in places of beauty, where the water and air meet the mountains dark-soiled. Food grows effortlessly, and so does greed. We live in a time of suffering in places of beauty, where yesterday's rebel is today's president, and greed cowers the hurt children whose hunger not only for their mother's milk, but a safe place where peace storms the land with smiles and the tender removal of all aspects of war. A phantasm of peace. A peace unlike the other ones, negotiated and then neglected, thus military rifles, handguns, machetes, bowie knives, unexploded landmines, all made so that peace will end and terror return. What you hear is the sea. The heavy waves come in, go out. Stars pattern Orion's belt, or is that his heel? And then another woman of letters departs. Will she step on Orion's heel? Would she say, "Excuse me, I did not see your heel"? Would she try to hide her error as her celestial garments drag across the sky, night sky? What if Orion could speak? And if he did, would he say, "All the poets love my heel or my belt"? You're not the first to seek anchor here. Thank you.
More applause, please, for Patricia Spears Jones. Thank you. Amazing. I got goosebumps. Wow. Tough act to follow. Nah, anyway. But we are supremely qualified to do so. Next, we're going to bring up Garrard Conley, but to introduce Garrard, we're going to bring up one of Garrard's students, Christian Gregory, to the stage to introduce Garrard. Christian, come on up.
Thank you. A graduate of and Truman Capote Fellow of Brooklyn College's MFA program specializing in fiction, Garrard Conley is currently an assistant professor of creative writing at Kennesaw State University. Conley is the New York Times bestselling author of the 2016 memoir Boy Erased, nominated for a Lambda Literary Award and featured as a top nonfiction book by O Magazine, BuzzFeed Books, and Shelf Awareness, among others. Translated in over a dozen languages, Boy Erased was adapted into the 2018 motion picture of the same name. Conley is also the creator and co-producer of the podcast on Erased, the history of conversion therapy in America, and is the scholarship recipient to several noted writers' conferences, including MacDowell, Breadloaf, Sawiney, the Studios of Key West, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and the Elizabeth Kostovo Foundation. His work has been published by the New York Times, Oxford American, Time, and the Virginia Quarterly Review. For me as a reader, one among the many features of Conley's work is an almost rapturous attachment to reading and writing. The young college-aged Conley of Boy Erased, who undergoes and survives gay conversion therapy, finds safe harbor in his memories of fiction, even as he memorizes the pages from the doctrinal handbook of love in action. He longs to return to writing in his Moleskine. Harrowing as it is heartfelt, Boy Erased tunes itself to the acute memory of details. From the sheen of a showroom car refracting the image of a Bible study group to a parade of ducks through the lobby of the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, to the auburn blur of the Ozarks seen peripherally from the car's window, to the blank unwritten page of a white ceiling as the narrator confronts the pain of life and ideation to end it. But as Conley thankfully reminds us, his second skin is writing. And it is this palimpsest of observation, imagination, and composition which gives shape to, renders legible, and even rescues one's life. His most recent work, All the World Beside, a queer retro speculation set in Puritan New England, too, is imbued with ravenous readers and fervent writers. Conley's characters pine over sermons and letters of confession and desire and teach one another to read. In this new work, Conley revels in a nouveau pseudo-scriptural prose, replete with restraint, fervor, heat, and Neoplatonic beauty. As the minister Nathaniel describes salvation to his son, Conley's diction, pattern, syntax, and creation from negation reach toward beauty. The minister describes, quote, not honeyed light, but light made of honey, not mist like blue satin, but satin itself, not bird song, but the song of creation itself. In our writer's workshop, Garrett encourages us to push against harmful myths and oppressive narratives, risk jarring contrasts, and rebel against the comp teacher's directive to make one's prose flow. As an observer, writer, and writing instructor, Garrett invites us to question why, as he playfully implies, why not? As a reader's writer, Conley's postmodern queer aesthetics edges toward a different sort of revivalism as he brings new life and futurity to history's erasures. Queer futurity, or a possibility of what may be, but is not yet, seems essential amid existential erasure, endemic in viral book bans across the country. How fortunate are we to have such a writer, educator, and advocate in Conley, writing histories and queer fictions onto the shelves and stacks. It is my honor to welcome the ever-observant, deeply thoughtful, chronically and joyfully questioning, and defender of all that is good and all that is beautiful, Garrard Conley, to the podium.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. I mean, can you guess that all my students are really talented here? It's so exciting. Patricia, it's such an honor to have shared the stage with your poetry. It's so beautiful. Thank you. And it is such an honor to come back here so many times. I've been coming back since, on and off since 2016, and I keep joking to David and Sarah that I just want to write more books so I can keep coming back and being relevant enough for that. So it's my motivation to sit down and write every day. Because I think one great thing that I've learned coming here so many times is how each time you get up on the stage, you have a different memory of another time when you stood on the stage, maybe when you were in a different part of your life, or when you were writing this book, for example, which I was writing I think pretty much since 2016, this novel, All the World Beside, and many times spending the week writing early in the mornings before class and talking to my editor. It always strangely came at the same time that like my editor's letters would show up, and I'd have to like scramble while I'm teaching to like do all of these things. So it's really surreal to be up here reading from this, and Christian actually quoted from a part that I will be reading from today, so I think that's very apt. Thank you. So all you need to know is this is a book set in the 18th century sort of Puritan colonies in Massachusetts in a fictional town called Cana. And there's a love story between two men in it, but right now the characters involved are Ezekiel, the minister's son, one of the men who is a part of the love story's son, Ezekiel, and his mother, Catherine. And they are going out to wash their laundry in the river. So that's where we are. The shore of his mother's palm, her warmth as she leads him along the banks to their spot by the river. On the other bank, women sing in a strange language. French, his mother tells him, the French who have claimed a patchwork command over this vast continent. She has learned a few words to greet them. He swallows her words, carries them in the back of his throat until one day, without warning, they erupt from his mouth. Bonjour, bonjournie. The sound is bright, light on his tongue. His mother laughs. The women say something sweet and playful in their language, arise in the sounds of their words like the flight of a dove. They wear simple gray dresses with no caps, arms bare, stained copper by the sun. Where fabric meets skin holds magic, gathering his eyes there to feast, sleeves fluttering, the revelation of pale skin beneath. Their hair falls freely to their temples and cheeks pasted like vines. His mother shakes out their sheets with a sudden flourish, flashing them up to meet the sun. He helps her carry the heavy wet sheets to the undergrowth, where they stretch them upon bare twigs for drying. Who are those women, Mother? Those women are nobody, Ezekiel, nobody important to us here in Cana. Beneath the canopy, in the tunnel they have made for themselves, they settle into the undergrowth, their backs to the dewy grass, a white sky now in place of blue. His mother stretches her arms behind her head, yawning, her mouth the long O of his alphabet primer. He watches her eyes grow heavy. Somewhere beyond their sky, the women begin to move off, their words soft, sweet against his ears, falling like the quiet buzzing of fireflies at dusk. When he wakes, it is past noon, the sun already slung behind the pines. He knows its course now, knows how it watches over them with regularity, a burning clock face that he's been told never to look at directly. He presses out of the tunnel. The women are long gone, the muddy tracks along the bank the only evidence they had been here. He has learned not to be shocked by appearances and disappearances. He and his mother have seen many people on these banks. She has told him that this continent houses people different from themselves, that these wanderers may be in search of a home like their family once was. But who are those women, he asks each time he sees another group. Those women are nobody, Ezekiel, nobody important to us here in Cana. They will find their own home soon enough. He thinks of the women walking for days on end with no horses. He has never seen laundresses on horses, singing hymns in another language, eyes wandering the landscape in search of a sign. Nobodies, free to do as they like, to find a home as they like. The thought is terrifying and exciting. It is as though he were floating above them right now, safe beside the home he and his mother have built, yet somehow out there with those strangers, too, directing their steps as the sun directs his day. Go, go, follow the sound of rushing water, follow it deep into the valley. He returns to his mother's side and tries to shake her awake. She does not move. Only her eyelids begin to twitch. He shakes her again, harder this time. She moans but does not awaken. Not new, this little game of theirs. Only it is not a game. Something has hold of his mother, the same something that keeps her in bed all day. He cannot predict the hour it will take her from him. He does not know why it comes or why she submits to it, or why he cannot see this something when it arrives. If he could watch out for it, even if it were mere shadow, But the something that takes his mother carries no form. It seems to live inside her. There is nothing he can do to prevent its grabbing hold of her. He is helpless before it, and even as he prays each day to be given the sight to see it, whatever devil it may be, he does not really believe it will ever appear. For the demon belongs only to her, and this makes him feel even more helpless and alone. He gives up, stands again. A family of geese has arrived on the other shore, stamping about in the tracks the women left behind. He draws close to the water, shields his eyes to watch them, the sun hot and burning on his neck. There, nearby, on the branch of an oak, a simple shift of fine white linen. The breeze inflates the sleeves, threatening to knock the shift into the mud. The river is fast moving and deeper than usual. It is the S that cuts through the eastern part of their town, dividing the fields. Once his father walked him the length of the river span through Cana, listing each new sight. "These are but shadows," his father said. "We walk in shadows, child. One day, when we have reached those glorious shores of heaven, we shall see not honeyed light, but light made of honey, not mist like blue satin, but satin itself, not bird song, but the song of creation itself. So long as you seek out the right kind of beauty, you will possess inside of you the power to comprehend salvation." Ezekiel has been training himself to seek out only the right kind of beauty. His sense of the beautiful is often at odds with his father's command. Yesterday, he had spotted a bit of yellow ribbon from one of his sister's dresses caught in her chest of drawers. Touching the fabric, so soft and pliant, he felt as though it were beauty crafted solely for his hands. He suspects his father does not want him to take notice of such things, that there is something wrong in what he notices, but he could no more ignore it than he could forsake the air he breathes. The shift flashes in the wind. Below it, geese hunt the grassy banks for food, their long necks folding upon themselves in one easy fluid motion, the water beside them moving in tandem, so all about Ezekiel there is ease, surrender. He steps closer to the shore, shoes sinking into mud. He kicks them off. He removes his stockings and places them inside his shoes, tossing them somewhere behind him. He rolls up his breeches. When he steps into the water, icy tongues lick his feet, his calves. He is freed once more. At 4, he must wear adult clothes. Gone is the gown he wore before this age. Now he must wear his worms, the name he has given to the breeches that seem to swallow him whole, impeding his movement, his freedom. "Worms!" his father had shouted from the pulpit, Ezekiel watching from the pew directly below, in awe of the sudden stranger with his father's face who shouted and pleaded with the flock to feel, for a moment, the fiery flames of hell, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. And if thy foot offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter halt into life than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched. Ezekiel had heard the word echoing in his head after that, "Worms, worms." When he placed his legs inside a pair of breeches for the first time, he thought of worms digging their way up from hell to meet him. Sometimes he grows angry that his father is allowed to wear the gown he wants to wear. He asked his father once why it is he continues to wear the gown, and his father told him that one day he, too, would wear the gown once more when he finally becomes the minister he is destined to become. It is to this idea and this alone of wearing a gown again that Ezekiel is attracted to the ministry. Totally. Y'all know what kind of character this is now. As the water swells around his thighs, Ezekiel considers how it would feel to cut off his feet, to cut off the hand that so desperately wishes to touch the shift on the opposite bank, how to cut off skin from the body, every inch of it, skin that desires nothing more than to be held in the loose fabric of childhood. What would be left after all of the cutting? Would there be a person after that? The water pulls him deeper, though his heels sink into mud. The sun cooks the back of his neck, its reflection in the water bright, blinding. He closes his eyes, the water now lapping his shoulders, his chin. He breathes through his nose. When next he opens his eyes, the shore is still far away, but it's too late to turn back. He checks to see if his mother is asleep, and yes, she remains buried beneath the sheet, oblivious. He steps deeper into the water, unsure now, but there is no going back. His balance has already tipped toward that other shore. Any moment he will sink under. He is tired, tired like his mother. The shift flashes white, a flag offering surrender, peace, heaven. He lets himself go to float toward it. And I won't leave you on that. There's a little coda with the mother, so you won't wonder if he drowned. When Catherine awakens, dusk fills the air. Where there had once been no life in her limbs, there is now an abundance of energy. She scrambles to her feet, knocking the clean sheet to the dirt, rendering useless the one thing she had been able to offer the day. Sarah, the real woman of the house now, will no doubt wonder what has happened to her mother. She had not told a soul where she was going this afternoon, had used up the sudden willpower she detected in herself with immediate action, as if to prove she could still be Catherine. But there's something else. There had been something else. Why is it she must now move with haste to the bank? There had been the women, yes, and she searches all about her, looking for signs of Ezekiel, her heart suddenly outsized for her chest. He's nowhere, her boy, lost. She calls out to him, her voice no longer her own, the desperate sound of an animal caught in a predator's jaws. Geese honk angrily in response. She returns to the undergrowth and searches every inch for him. There are no signs, no clues, nothing he has left behind aside from a confused set of muddy tracks. For a moment, she is angry with him for being so careless. Then she reminds herself that it is not his fault. He's a curious boy. Her vision escapes her. She cannot see. The shadows have begun to creep in, and soon it will be dark, too dark to find him. She calls out again, this time with something beyond desperation, a hint of resignation she does not wish to hear, for it should not be possible for a mother to give up so easily, to lose hope, to sink into despair. But she is such a mother, she knows, because for as long as she can remember here in Cana, she has felt that a punishment is due, or perhaps that one has been slowly enacting itself upon her. Catherine sinks to her knees on the muddy bank. Had she the energy to pray, she would offer up one final prayer, that the Lord spare her child and take her in his place. When next her eyes meet the opposite bank, however, what she sees is a flash of pale light, almost like a rising moon, somewhere within the line of trees. Perhaps whoever is in those trees will know where her son is gone, will tell her where to look. She glances behind her once more, then enters the water, realizing too late that she has not removed her shoes. She feels them sink into the mud, eagerly abandoning her feet. With each step, she sinks deeper, half fearing she will land upon a bone or a tender bit of flesh, something to tell her the son she loves is under the water. When she emerges on the opposite bank, her legs are coated in mud. She shivers from the cold. She must look like a madwoman, but her feet propel her toward the stranger in the trees, the person who seems to be hiding from her now. As her feet meet the other bank, it is not so much the shape of him or his movements that tell her that this is her son, a stranger now, so much larger than he ever seemed to be, so much older, though certainly his shape and the movement of his limbs are more familiar than her own. Rather, it is his restlessness, his untamable nature, that announces his presence, the same nature living inside herself. Only in him its expression takes the form of a wandering spirit, a desire to venture forth into wilderness, whereas in her it brings forth heaviness, surrender, submission to the bed's tide. A blessing to move outward rather than inward, to push forward rather than to retreat inside. My boy, she says, stretching out her hands, sobs rising to her chest. I thought I had lost you. She presses him to her, coating him in mud, kissing the top of his head. He is warm despite the coolness of the evening, despite the fact that he too has been coated in the river's mud. In the bit of world beyond his shoulder, she can see his shirt and breeches hanging upon a limb, discarded, and it is only once she sees this that she realizes he is wearing a woman's large shift, the fabric falling to his toes. What is this, child? I came across it, Mother. Father said I should seek beauty. Did one of those French women bring you here? No, Mother, Ezekiel says, eyes filling at the sound of his mother's fear, her anger. I wanted to wear it. What is this about your father? He said I should find shadows of heaven. But this shift is ugly. Someone didn't want it. It is not for you to wear. Why? Because it's not fitting for a boy to wear. Your father did not mean that kind of beauty. You must take it off at once. Why? What were you thinking, child? She cannot breathe. The sobs grip her throat. You could have drowned. Are we in heaven yet, Mother? Father said I would find the heavenly shore if I sought beauty. Catherine's hand moves before she can think. A slap, one that sounds just like her mother's. His face is so surprised that he doesn't cry at first. It is Catherine who is the first to cry. She holds him tightly, begging forgiveness through her touch, for she no longer possesses the words to ask it. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrard Conley. That was wonderful. See, reading fiction is good. It's good. We have one more faculty member that is going to come up in a second. I just want to remind you that tomorrow at 12:30 we're doing a brown bag lunch with Laura Shabbat, who is a longtime Provincetown resident and artist and art historian, who's going to give a talk on and a slide presentation on the history of Provincetown as an arts community. So it's purely voluntary. If you feel like getting a sandwich or something coming on by, she does a great job, so I recommend it. And also, the sign-up sheet is filling up over there for Thursday night student night readings. So, yay to all of you who have signed up on it. And if you haven't yet, totally okay. But I do encourage you to sign up. It's a great experience. And with that, back to business. I have the great pleasure to bring up our summer program assistant, Hannah Rivers, to introduce Nabil Gonzalez. Come on up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Garrett and Patricia. Nabil Gonzalez holds a double BFA in printmaking and graphic design from the University of Texas at El Paso and an MFA in printmaking from the Rhode Island School of Design. As a dedicated studio artist, Gonzalez focuses on the social and political issues affecting the borderland region between the United States and Mexico. Her work explores the erasure and reestablishment of identity through the repetition and layering of images, marks, and materials. Gonzalez's art aims to awaken and bring awareness to a society increasingly numb and unresponsive to the brutal acts of violence against minority groups. She strives to be a voice for the countless murdered and disappeared victims of social and political injustice, creating works that challenge perceptions and provoke reflection. Her pieces have been exhibited across the United States, Mexico, Colombia, and China, and her artist books and prints are included in museums and library special collections throughout the United States. She is a professor at the University of Texas, El Paso, where she teaches printmaking, drawing, and graphic design. Please join me in welcoming Nabil Gonzalez.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here for my talk. I'm really happy to be back at the center. This is my second time here, so I'm really excited to, be invited a second time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I wanted to start my presentation by showing everyone this picture of my hometown. So I was born and raised in El Paso, and I am also lucky to be back there, teaching at the university. But the reason I wanted to show this picture is because I want everyone to see how incredibly close we are to the border. So if you see that dashed red line across the photograph, that is basically the division of the two countries. That's the Rio Grande. And then also I wanted to point out how incredibly close my campus is to the border. And in reality, my building is this little building here, and it faces directly to the border. Every time I go up to the gallery, our gallery has this big window, and it's facing directly towards Mexico. Our university is about 85% Hispanic, and it's a college is, you know, this place where people come to learn, where people, you know, come to better their lives, to get an education, to you know, have a career, and, you know, be able to provide for themselves and, you know, eventually a family. So it's this very vibrant place, but what we don't realize is that right across from our campus, this is the scene almost every single day. Border Patrol agents, you know, chasing down the road immigrants that try to cross and make it, you know, to the U.S. in basically search of the same thing, of this American dream of being able to provide for their families, to provide for themselves, because it's something that sometimes, you know, it becomes impossible to do in their countries. So I just think, you know, it's very interesting how we have this place of higher education, and right across this place, this is, you know, happening. So with that, I start with my first piece here. This piece titled 022543, I-90S. This piece is, this is a laser engraving on wood, and it might be a little bit hard to figure out what it is, but it's a road down here in the center. This piece is really hard to photograph. A lot of my work, you experience it better when you're really standing in front of it because it's so layered and so textured. But this piece came, I'm gonna show you the actual photograph of the road. And this road is just south of I-90 in Texas, near the town of Sanderson, Texas. It's a super tiny town near the border. And this road is used by Border Patrol vehicles as they patrol the area, you know, looking for any immigrants that might be out there trying to cross, or you know, just sometimes people are lost out there. Also, a lot of hikers that go to Big Bend tend to sort of deviate from the roads, and, you know, they end up lost in the desert. But if you follow this road all the way down to its end, it leads to the border with Mexico. And here's an installation shot of the piece, and you might be wondering what the number is. So the number is, a date is February 25th, 43 immigrants surrendered to the Border Patrol authorities because they had been lost in the desert for days. They had no water, no food. Some were injured. They had kids with them as well, and they couldn't continue the journey. So, you know, so one of them was lucky enough to have reception on a phone and was able to call 911, so the authorities could come and, you know, aid them. But with this piece, there's also this component out here. It's sort of like this representation of the desert, of the texture, bringing out the sand into this, you know, gallery, into this white space, this white box. But also, this line of sand crosses the entire gallery, so dividing the gallery in two. And I have another shot here. So I have a shot over here of the piece being shown in El Paso, and then over here being shown across the border in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. And one thing that I felt, you know, it was very interesting to me to see how my viewers would interact with the piece. So as people, you know, started coming in during opening night, I never mentioned anything about that piece, about the sand, about what it meant, if it was meant to interact with, or, you know, just, you know, kindly just jump over it, don't disrupt the sand. I never mentioned anything. Even the gallery director didn't know I was gonna put it there, so it was a total surprise. But I was more interested in seeing how people would interact, if they would question what it meant or what it was. And interestingly enough, in El Paso, about, I would say, 80% of the viewers never questioned what it was. They never came up to me and asked or, you know, comment about how they felt about the meeting or what they saw there. They just kind of, you know, they would walk around the gallery, and some would step on the sand, some would jump over that line, but mostly, you could see how on El Paso, the gallery, the sand is all spread on the floor, but in Juarez, it was a totally different experience. As people were coming into the gallery, they were confronted by this barrier that was dividing the gallery, and a lot of them, they came up to me and they were curious. They asked about the piece, if it had a title, if it was part of the piece that was hanging on the wall. Some just commented, is this meant to represent the border? They understood. They understood what the meaning of that line was, to divide the gallery, to, kind of place this border in a place that is totally unexpected. And they were not sure about how they would, navigate the gallery, if they were allowed to jump it or if they had to stay on the side of, which they entered. So it was very interesting to see that. And also in El Paso, I had some people that would just walk on it. People would just kick the sand in different directions, not really questioning why it was there or why they were doing those things. So it brought me back to a question that keeps coming up with my work of, who are you? And it's this question that I always think about, what is my place in this country? What is my place in the art world? So it makes me question a lot of, things like that. So this next piece is called The Blackout of the American Dream. And this piece was created in a response after the Haitian president was assassinated in 2021. And how the country went into chaos, and a lot of their people, wanted to escape violence, death, just, survive, basic survival. So a lot of them embarked in this journey from Haiti to Latin America, to Mexico, and, eventually to the border. And these people traveled from July to September, so almost 3 months just to reach the border with Mexico. And once they did reach the border, a lot of them went directly to the border of Del Rio, Texas, with Ciudad Acuña, Coahuila in Mexico. And as they reached this border, they were chased off the river, the edge of the river, by Border Patrol agents riding horses. And, they were whipped also. They were shot at, and again, there were kids. So these pieces, it might be a little bit hard to see, but there's some figures that have been blocked out, pretty much just highlighting the Border Patrol agents, but their faces have been also removed. So in my work, I talk a lot about removal of identity and what that means, in this sort of setting. They leave their countries so as not to die victims of violence from the gangs and the drug trade. They are trying to escape the most widespread form of violence that haunts them daily, which is the lack of work and economic means to secure the most basic necessities for human survival. And here is the other half of that series of, Blackout of the American Dream. And the title came up to me because since I was a little girl, I remember, my parents talking about the American dream. And it's something that keeps coming up as, someone that grew up in the border and having friends that come from families that their parents migrated to this country illegally in search of that American dream, in search of having, those economic means to sustain a family and just provide for their kids. And also with this piece, the text comes from different interviews with migrants, and I just took bits and pieces from a couple of them and used them as these lines that are floating around the pieces. And before I switch to the next slide, I just want to point out also that all of these events of violence against Haitian people happened under the Biden administration. Annually, 500,000 migrants from Latin America travel north in hopes of reaching the U.S.-Mexico border. For many, riding La Bestia is their main source of transportation. So La Bestia, or the Beast, or Train of Death, is this train that runs all across Mexico. And for a lot of the migrants, especially the ones coming from, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, they start their journey by foot, walking. Some of them, if they have the means, the money to buy bus tickets or pay a smuggler to just get them up to the Mexico border, they will do that. But often, once they reach Mexico, it's a long journey to get to the border. So the easiest and cheapest way to do it is to ride this train. And often this is what most of the stretch of the train really looks like, having, people riding on the top of these containers. So just to show you here on the map, you have people traveling from down here just to reach this border with Mexico. And this is where that route of the train really starts. This is the state of Chiapas, Mexico. And they travel all the way to Mexico City, which reaching Mexico City is sort of like reaching the half point of that journey. And that's a 1,450-mile journey that they have to do riding on top of this train. So a lot of them end up riding between 10 to 15 trains just to make it up to Mexico City, halfway point. From there, they will divide into the 3 main routes. So the one that leads to the Tijuana border and Nogales border with Arizona and California. The middle one leads up to my hometown, the border of Juarez with El Paso, Texas. And then this is still part of that main route of La Bestia, which reaches several border towns on the lower part of Texas. So really, just getting to this part of the journey, a lot of them die because they fall from the top of the carts. They either fall asleep or they're so weak because no food, no water. Some of them are sick. Also, getting on the train means sometimes they have to jump on the train as it's moving, so they also risk losing their lives or losing limbs. And from those photos of the train, I came to these pieces that originally it was going to be an artist book, this long accordion book of just showing different images of the train. But as I started experimenting with this technique, so this is a monotype with a laser engraving image over it. I just fell in love with how it looked and how I was able to fragment the images. So a lot of the photos that I'm using, I do change things with Photoshop first. But no one really gets to see kind of like the differences from the original to the edited version. And then also, as I'm using these different printmaking techniques, I am losing some information from the transferring from the computer to the, to the matrix, to the paper. So I think that's also a really big part of my work, the fragmentation of information, how it changes from its original state to the end product of the piece. So here's some images of this series titled Train of Forgotten Dreams. And again, on this piece, I removed the immigrants, just leaving those, the empty silhouettes. And with my work, you will see a lot of the silhouette repeating over and over. And to me, using these silhouettes is basically, I'm acting as our government. I'm removing their identities because oftentimes, when the migrants reach the border and, if they get taken to these detention centers, it doesn't really matter what their name is or where they're coming from or what kind of life they had. The only thing that matters is the number that gets assigned to them. So, and again, this image here is showing a map that I just showed previously of the different routes. The conditions in the border detention camps have been distressing and inhumane. Children were often separated from their parents and placed in cages, creating a deeply traumatic experience. Many were forced to sleep on the floor without adequate bedding or comfort. The psychological impact of these conditions left many children unable to speak due to the trauma and language barrier. Here's an image of what it looks like inside of those detention centers for the kids, how, you know, they have been separated from their parents, some from their older siblings, and they're just forced to, you know, stay in these cages, and they really don't have any comfort there. And think about, you know, they've been going through this journey for months, and just, you know, to be taken away from their parents. A lot of them, most of them don't even speak English, and you know, it's a traumatic experience, and you know, those foil blankets doesn't compare to, you know, having your mom or your dad hug you, wrap their arms around you. So from that photo, this piece was inspired by that, and I came across this article that was talking about the first 5 known cases of children that died while being held in these detention centers. So I created this piece, which is made of 5 panels, and each one of those panels is dedicated to one of these kids that died. And the title of this piece is Journey, and the names of the kids. And I'm going to switch to this zoom in version of that piece. And the bottom section, again, you will see that silhouette just being repeated over and over and over, as well as you can see some silhouettes are more prominent than others. Some are sort of, you know, fading into that background, into the noise. To also address this, you know, how a lot of them died during this journey. And sometimes it's very hard for their families back home to really know if they made it across or where they are or what happened to them. So they kind of get lost in this society and what's currently happening, you know, in this world. So also on the top section, I have some text that I included with each one of the panels, but again, my work is really hard to photograph just because of all the layering. But I have that text, and the first panel, Felipe, father and son ended up in a holding cell in Alamogordo, New Mexico on Christmas Eve, after days of being shuttled from one Border Patrol facility to another. Felipe diagnosed with flu. He died alone in a cell. Felipe was 8 years old. Jacqueline survived the 2,000-mile journey from northern Guatemala before being detained and separated from her family. Died alone while held in custody. Jacqueline was 7 years old. Juan just wanted a steady job and to earn $13 an hour. He wanted to send money back home so his parents could afford to buy corn and salt. He died while being detained. Medical assistance was denied. Juan was 16 years old. Unknown Guatemalan boy, traveling alone under the care of strangers. Died while being held in a cage with other children. Child was not able to speak, provide information, or had any form of identification. Child was 2 years old. Carlos, diagnosed with flu, found dead on the floor of his cell the next morning, died alone. Carlos was 16 years old. And also from that image of the kids, I came up with this. This is an intaglio print, and again, using that shape of a general silhouette, not really pointing out if it's a woman, a man, a child. It's just a general shape of the human body, but also it's this collage of the different expressions of children from all the photographs that I went through as I was doing, my research. So a lot of the imagery from my work comes from these photographs that when I'm conducting my research, I always find or try to identify a group of photos that just keeps coming up and showing up and showing up and showing up. And as someone that grew up in the border, a lot of the times these images sort of lose meaning. We become numb to them because it's something that we see every single day. They risk assault, torture, kidnapping, sexual abuse, human trafficking, and death in the hopes of making it to and across the border into the United States. This mostly applies to women and children. Here's an image of one of those, big caravans that start in South America and, just again, walking by foot, traveling to reach the border with Mexico. From that piece, this is one of my most recent artist books, and this book is made up of 7 pages, 5 of which are these sort of like folders with a window. And these 5 pages highlight 5 specific towns in Texas. They highlight Brownsville, Del Rio, Eagle Pass, El Paso, and McAllen. These 5 towns have seen a crazy increase in illegal immigration since 2020. And I wanted to highlight those towns again because they're not really very known parts of Texas. They're kind of, on the lower part of Texas. Whenever people think about Texas, I think they think about Austin, Houston, these really fun places. But the reality in the border of Texas is completely, different. And each one of these pages on the side has the name of the town with the coordinates, the map coordinates, but also from those pages you can pull out these drawings. And these drawings are just, there again, you will see the silhouettes, those groups of silhouettes, coming together. But also on the opposite side is this, a collection of little pieces that come off from other works that are part of this body of work. And to me, I like to collect even the smallest piece of paper as I'm working because I feel like they hold this history of the process of the piece. And as I'm working on these pieces, I feel like they also hold the emotions I feel as I'm navigating through research, navigating to create through the process of creating the pieces. So I think they're equally as important and beautiful because it's just this, again, fragmentation of information. And the text that you see, again, with these pieces, they're little snippets that I take from articles about, immigration and the border. And I'll read the text. Y aunque también les dan agua, algunos tienen los ojos salidos de la deshidratación. And although they also give them water, some have their eyes bulging from dehydration. Here's another one of those drawings. Tienen las caras llagadas, los pies con ampollas. Their faces are sore, their feet are blistered. And again, this book is made up of 5 of these. I only have 2. If you want to see the rest, you can go to my website. But then I come to this other piece. It's untitled. I feel like the title for this piece kind of changes every time I show it. I think it's one of those pieces that, depending on the space, I will title it or I won't title it. So it changes a lot. But this piece was also inspired by that first image of the caravan of people, you know, this big crowd of people, how it really becomes hard to pinpoint, you know, who everyone is there. I feel like in crowds like that, everyone just becomes one. And again, it's talking about this loss of identity. And with this piece, these are these really long drawings. They're about 10 feet by 27 inches wide. So each one of those faces has been drawn with charcoal. So it took me a while, just kind of, you know, in my studio, drawing face after face after face. And each one of those faces is different, but at the same time, when you look at the piece, they all look the same. But again, if you get close, you will see those differences. But then, you know, you see these black sections, you know, crossing, intersecting the drawing, and those lines that go across the piece are, again, meant to represent borders and what it means. But also, they do obscure the faces that are behind. So again, it's thinking about the people that don't make it, the people that get lost, the people that get forgotten. And each one of these silhouettes has a word, immigrant, Mexican, and illegal, which in the border where I'm from, these three words basically mean the same thing, criminal. And here's an installation shot of that piece. This is in a gallery back home in El Paso. And I was lucky that they let me use the basement for this piece, because I think it created the perfect atmosphere for it. The ceiling was very low. You could see how the pieces are longer and sort of, you know, dangling there on the floor. But also, these benches here, I asked the viewers to only be there by themselves or two people at a time, and then just sit and meditate with the piece, just, you know, stare at it and think about, the title of this exhibition was Who You Are. So really thinking about that question, like, who are you in 2024? Mexican Americans in the Southwest along the U.S.-Mexico border were lynched between the years of 1846 and 1925. Roughly 5,000 Mexicans and Mexican Americans were killed during this period because of language barrier, culture, and religion. So it's 2024 and the same problem still exists. These pieces here were one of the first ones that I created when I started working with this body of work. And these were made during COVID. I didn't have access to a printmaking studio, so I was working from my home studio where I don't have a press. So what I really found interesting and beautiful about the pieces was all the noise that got created on the background. Because of not having access to proper equipment. But at the same time, I felt that this noise is kind of like the noise that happens around this issue, that it's been happening for decades. But again, you know, why is it still a problem? And I feel like it just becomes a noise that can be heard along the border, but beyond that, it just kind of, you know, it becomes quieter and quieter and quieter. So these are the first pieces where I actually, again, started working with that shape of the silhouette and really thinking about what it meant. And this is where, again, I started thinking about removal of identity and memory fragmentation, how traumatic events like this really change the way that people remember things or the way that they hold memories. So I really like showing the I guess this would be like the good print, and this would be the ghost print of the good one. So I think both of them are equally beautiful. One speaks to the current events that are happening, the other one to history and memory fragmentation, erasure, removing. And also, I was thinking about how when immigrants reach the border, they're sort of stuck in this floating world where they don't belong in Mexico, but they also don't belong in the US. And a lot of them are just caught in between, not really, being able to go back home because they fear of violence or they fear for their lives. So they're sort of like stuck in this limbo. So this piece really, made me think about that because of the floating figures and the marks that appeared on the background. For these pieces, I really didn't have a plan. I was just inking a plate and kind of going for it and looking for those happy accidents that happen through the process of printmaking. So I want to end my presentation by asking everyone to think about these 3 questions. And I want you to think about, who are you in America? Who are they in America? And by they, I don't necessarily mean immigrants, but any unrepresented group in this country. And I also want you to think, where are you currently in 2024? Thank you.
Can we have another round of applause for Nabil Gonzalez? Thank you very much. So we'll do a little Q&A, and I'll just remind you that we're live streaming this event. So if you have a question, wait till Hannah or Sarah get to you with a microphone and speak your question into the microphone so our viewers at home can hear your question. And yeah, who has a question? Here we have a couple already.
This is for Nabil. I really loved your presentation. My wife is an artist, so I kind of relate to it. But I think when you're talking, I'm reminded of 2 books that I read. One is called American Dirt, which is about the train that you're talking about, and the other one is Everyone I Know Is Here, and it's a very documentation about the whole immigration policy of the United States in South American countries, and it's an excellent book to read. And it's a very powerful book, and it's very difficult to read because of all the torture and everything else that went down. So just kind of a FYI, that's all. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One for you also. Salito, the memoir about the poet who was also talked about the train and the crossing, and it was an amazing memoir. But I guess this is something that I think about because it's never ending, and I agree when we come in, and I try to read about it, but I'm not there. And I know there's been talk about spending money in the countries of origin to help people be able to stay. You on the ground, what do you see? What is there any hope? And what can we do as a country? Because it's so vast and it is overwhelming because you can't just throw money at it so I want to just hear what your perspective in.
Wow, I think think there's hope, but I also know that there is a lot of work to be done. And it's not only work to be done in our country, but also in their countries. And by work, I really mean their governments and the way that the government chooses to spend their funding. I think it's no surprise that a lot of these countries, they don't really care about their people, they only care about their pockets. So I think it starts there with changing the way that their governments are structured. But also I feel like in current times here in our country, there's division going on because of our elections and our candidates and everything. So I think it also comes to respect and respecting everyone and their beliefs and their ideas, and just kind of, not creating violence, create dialogue instead and educate yourself.
Yeah, especially the politician piece.
Yes.
And Garrett, I have a question for you about living in the world that you created here. You had your life, with conversion therapy, and yet you're in a world where, I don't know, what was it like to live there as you're writing it?
Are you talking about the memoir or the novel?
I'm talking about the novel. Like, you came out of the memoir, and here you are in this novel,
yeah.
creating this kind
Very
of
different. Well, different in
repressive.
some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what inspired it and then how I got into that real quick. My father is a missionary Baptist preacher whose ideas, once I left, home, felt very foreign to me in many ways, right? I discovered a very different way of thinking, and I would have arguments or long conversations with my dad about scripture because I'd memorized it as a child, right? And I could hold my own, at a certain age. And what I found fascinating was how much more informed he was than I thought he was. And, he was like reading Jonathan Edwards at one point, 18th century minister, right? And so I decided to read Jonathan Edwards. I was like, my dad's not going to one-up me on all of this, so I'm going to read it. I found a real love of language in Jonathan Edwards and a kind of nuance that I hadn't been expecting. Certainly many of his ideas are odious to us. His treatment of Native Americans is disgusting and when we read it now. And I think, but I found this, I kept being drawn back to like wanting to argue with these men. And then in the middle of that, I thought, well, just to make things harder for myself, what would it be like if one of these ministers was sort of closeted, to use a language that we would use today that they wouldn't have back then? And what if some of what was driving some of this intensity was somehow tied to that? And then within that idea, I sort of planted multiple characters within his family that we would see today as queer. We would read them today as queer, but I couldn't use any of those words to describe them. And what would it be like if a family was sort of protecting each other, or they were discovering things about each other that they suddenly realized needed to be protected? And that was really interesting, like a challenge to me. And I didn't get to write. The real truth is I didn't get to write everything in Boy Erased, right? There are things that you leave out of memoir that are very personal, right? And so fiction can fill those gaps. And so I transposed some of these things into the past. And also just, going back to the origins of where a lot of these, harmful ideas came from, right? The Puritans are really something. And not to, they're nuanced in my book, and I did a lot of research, and of course everyone's a human being, right? Like even the people who do absolutely terrible things are human beings, and so I had to approach it from that. But I was just interested in like, okay, well, where did my dad get these ideas from, and like how did the Anabaptists influence the Baptists, and how did all this Protestant, like the Great Awakening? Yeah. Such a wild time, right? People were they were very buttoned up, right, in services, and then suddenly they were sort of unleashing these emotional responses, which is a great setting for like a sort of queer awakening that's happening. So yeah.
But can I just say something? One of the things that's really interesting about the awakening stuff is that this also begins to be the beginning of the split between those who would support enslavement and those who didn't. Totally. So the Methodists were totally abolitionists. They were like, you cannot own something and be a Christian. And so the split in the Baptists between the Southern and Northern Baptists also came out of that. And nobody talks about that.
It's actually very nuanced moment,
yeah,
right?
it was
The
like
Quakers
extraordinary. And so, and also I just think a lot of times we don't think through our own history and how we get to where we are, because it's like been it's just cultural amnesia, which is really one of the most dangerous things that happened to this country. And another thing, I'm just going to go back to the question that was asked of her, and why were you only asking her? The problem with the reason why there is the issue on the border is because there has not been one piece of decent legislation around immigration for 40 years. That's why. And so people who have no idea what to do about this can treat other human beings like whatever, because there's no policy. There's no really serious policy other than treat these people like nothing. That's why. And if we don't start demanding a serious immigration policy in this country, all of us, not just people in El Paso or San Antonio or whoever's on the border, it's never going to change.
Don't apologize.
So as artists, do you ever find that bringing a political dimension or an identitarian perspective into your art can actually be limiting in some ways, and that there's a tension between the lived experience, which is almost too much, is somewhat in conflict with art or aesthetics, and how do you resolve that so that it doesn't become tendentious, rather something that's more transcendent?
How do you do it?
I have no idea. I'm not even sure I understand that question. Maybe it's because I'm old, but people have been sort of saying these things. Like, everybody here has some ideas about the politics in their lives, the culture in their lives, how they present themselves into the world. And some of that's going to get into whatever art you make, doesn't matter what kind of art it is. And some of it will not. And I think that kind of weird divide that comes basically out of Cold War, the Cold War idea of artists are above politics. Well, that's bullshit. And it always was bullshit. And so nobody's above anything. Except maybe, a former president, but he's 34 felon, Anyway, so I think what we have to do is to just make the, what is it that Gabriel Marquez said about being a revolutionary writer? Was the best thing about being a revolutionary writer is to write well. Mm-hmm. So if you write well, if you make great art, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I can say them real quick. I mean, I think just in terms of, I think I can only answer from what happened to me with Boy Erased, which was a very strange experience where my life story was suddenly used as a political instrument, and used in many ways. I wanted this, right? Like the film that came out, I was like, great, okay, got Nicole Kidman, people will pay attention to that, finally. Maybe someone will end conversion therapy. And it was used in a lot of ways to create legislation in many states to end conversion therapy. When I started writing Boy Erased, there were 0 states that had bans, and now we have half of them. Not that, you know, Boy Erased didn't do all of that, but like we worked with a lot of organizations to do that, and it felt so wonderful at the time. And the personal cost to that, I think with my family was pretty great, right? Like there were people trying to, like, they were showing up on my parents' doorstep. They were asking all sorts of really personal questions for my mom in like a grocery store. I mean, it was really stressful for all of us. And, but I did begin to notice how my story became something different in culture, right? So like, it began to be whitewashed in certain ways. Certain details were sort of eroded, right, from the story. Certain convenient ways of talking about it, which is like, oh, well, you know, everyone loves a good, you know, queer boy who's like loving his parents again and forgives his bigoted father who does, you know, like, and all these things were true for me, right? Like, I personally chose to forgive my family and talk to them and go through that long process, which was very hard for us. But it got sort of like smoothed into this, well, you know, look at this cute story where like they're back together and all queer people should go back to their parents, and you know, all of these weird ways that it was used that I had no control over. And I started to feel like, oh, I need to respond to everything. And no, right? You can't respond. I'm sure you know. Y'all both probably know very well.
Yo, I mean, it's like people really, the ways in which people, the ways in which our creative lives are dealt with in this country is truly dreadful. It is as if no one really wants to deal with the fact that everybody in this room, and all 3 of us, are incredibly complicated, often incredibly sophisticated human beings. They'd rather reduce every last one of us to, you know, whatever consumer items we have on, or some other label, because it's, you know, because what we don't talk about, and what, you know, is that we are also in late stage capitalism, where everything is monetized on some level, including the very complicated things about how do you deal with forgiveness and with coming back to the fold, but as your authentic self. What, you know, that's like really hard to do, and you can't put a dollar on that, but somebody's gonna try.
Well, I have to say that I think this iteration of presenters is perfect, because we've been talking so far this week about a very important thing that I think underpins the whole deal, and that's collaborating. And I love the 3 questions. They're going to keep me up tonight. And what it's going to do for me, however, is make me write about it. And it's going to tap on me and tap on me until I bleed. And, sorry. But I think we are in a rarefied environment right here where we all get it. But we have to show it. We have to be brave, and we have to be bold, and we have to be willing to lay ourselves bare. And if we do it, and then she does it, and then he does it, and I do it, and we keep doing it, and we keep doing it till we're raw, I think there's where the hope is. And it used to be that back in the days of ancient Greece and before that, it was the poets who showed the society the mirror. And the word polis, which we get political from, literally means citizen. It means people. And so I think if we, in our collaborations and in our solitary studios or office spaces or lying in bed at night, if we keep that word as part of our answer to those three questions, I think that's where the hope might be. And I just am in awe of this session. I'm gonna have a good cry. And when I say a good cry, I mean that. Okay. Thank you, all three of you.
Garrett, I love the book. I maybe took a strange conclusion away from it. So something about queer existence, that you could take the doctor and the minister and transpose them to any point in history, in any era, and they would exist. I just wondered if that was any intention of yours to kind of prove our existence.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the Washington Post review, I was accused of presentism. With that, yeah, it was a real, reviews are really annoying these days. But I thought we all knew it was fiction and it was like an amalgam of 18th century and 21st century, but whatever. Not still bitter. But I think that I'm okay with being accused of that because for me, that seems a little bit homophobic. Like, as if the way that I imagined selves in the past, some sort of identity, which I'm not talking about like some sort of transcendent religious identity of queerness, which like we like to do as queer people, right? Like we're like, born this way, all this stuff, which can get really annoying at times because we don't actually know where queerness comes from. The thing is like the validity of that existence is what I'm after, right? Whether or not it's something that you're born with or whether or not it's love that just happens, right? Or something fluid that occurs. It doesn't matter because the existence of it has always been challenged in some way. And we see that in documents, we see that in police reports. I did tons of research on this, right? And, of course we didn't use the terms we use today, and our terms determine in many ways how we react to ourselves, right? So to say gay man is very different from being like, someone who's not able to express their feelings in the 18th century, right? So that's true. But at the same time, I guess I was trying to explore what, love between men or love between women or love between different people could be in these different time periods and sort of to make an argument that there is something beautiful about being different in some ways. And I don't know, I mean, it's hard for me to like really suss out completely, but it's definitely a fascination of mine, yeah.
Seems like a good place to stop. One more big round of applause for our instructors, Nabil Gonzalez, Patricia Spears Jones, and Garrard Conley. Thank you all so much. Remember, Patricia and Garrard will be signing books at the back, so be sure to check out the books that are available and come back tomorrow when we have another wonderful faculty talk with artist Meg Hinton and writer Doug Bauer. Please join us again tomorrow. Thank you for coming.